My mission as the Virtual Writer of Residence for the Scottish Book Trust is to try and help you find ideas for stories. I know that some people just can't seem to find ideas, they just don't know where to look, and they actually think that you have to make things up all the time. And in actual fact, writers don't just make things up and pluck ideas out of the ether. They do that sometimes, but most of the time they actually look around them at people they know, at places they're familiar with, at things that have happened, and that is the trigger and the inspiration for stories which can turn out to be best-selling books. Sometimes are huge big books. Every story starts with a really, really small germ of an idea. And our first task that we're going to do today is actually going to be based on just looking at something very, very simple, but also very familiar. So every single person in a classroom, even those who don't think they're any good at writing and never have any ideas, are going to be able to do this task. You're going to write the first line of a story, but I'm going to give you the setting for the story, the background, and it's going to be your own house, and it's going to be first thing in the morning. You're waking up. Now, what's it like in your house in the morning? Does your mum or your dad have to shout and yell at everybody until they get out of bed? Or maybe everybody jumps up and all starts fighting to get into the shower? There's the background. Every single one of you sitting in the classroom watching this podcast just now will have a picture in your head of what breakfast time is like in your house and what it's like as you get ready for school. In fact, quite a lot of you would actually be able to write complete stories about a typical morning in your house. But we're going to just take things one stage further. You come downstairs, or you walk into your kitchen, or you walk into your hall, and one single thing has happened that is unusual. Now, what could it be? Here are a few first lines that I came up with, and I'm sure you can do much, much better. As soon as I woke up, I knew something was wrong. My dad's horrible singing wasn't echoing in the shower. Here's one that's maybe slightly funny. Well, good morning, sleepyhead, said Bob. Bob, our dog. Here's a scary one, or a horror one. Half asleep as usual, Darren shuffled into the kitchen and skidded in a giant puddle of blood. One that's maybe a bit and shocking. When Chloe tipped the cornflakes into her bowl, a huge grey rat plopped out the packet. Here's a weird one. Toast, Mum said. She turned. I screamed. She had no face. Or here's a fantastical one. When I drew back my curtains, I was sure I was still dreaming because my bedroom was flying through the air. And here's one that's a bit sick. Nigel watched while Dad glugged down the orange juice, then clutched his throat, gurgling. That's what I want you to do. Just write one first line that includes some detail that shows that the background to what you're writing about is really, really ordinary, but just make one thing different. And here's a tip. Make it about something you're interested in. If you hate science fiction stories, don't have an alien appearing in your kitchen and eating a bowl of porridge, because you're not going to enjoy carrying on with a story like that. If you hate romantic stories, don't have one where you come downstairs and somebody's kissing somebody else, because you're not going to be able to carry on with that either. You'll probably start to feel sick. Always, always write a story about something you're interested in, because if you're interested in the story, the chances are you're going to find it much, much easier to keep writing about it. The fun task for this particular first task in all the different podcasts is going to be for you to try and think of your favourite first line in any book that you've read. I've actually brought one of my favourite books here to show you, which is Skellig by David Almond. And the first line of that book is just brilliant because it's very, very simple. And I'll read it out to you. I found him in the garage on a Sunday afternoon, which is just such a simple line, but immediately you're thinking, what did the character who's telling this story find? And of course you find that it's an angel, which is is a kind of unusual thing that happens in a very ordinary setup. Think of your favourite first line from a book, and then if you're doing this in class, why don't you Why don't you pass the first lines round and join them all up and see what kind of story? You never know what you might end up with, what you end up with if everybody adds their first lines together. If you look on the Scottish Book Trust website, you can also see the favourite first lines from the books that the Scottish Book Trust staff have read. Some of you though might have thought that task was a bit on the easy side and you're a bit fed up and you want to do something slightly harder. So I'm just going to make this extension task slightly more difficult. Again, I want you to think of something very normal, but this time you're in school and it's just a normal day in school. And then something very, very unusual happens on a much bigger scale than the previous task. For example, maybe you're in the science lab and there's a massive explosion. Or maybe outside the school you hear this huge commotion and there's been an enormous accident. Or maybe, if you're into science fiction, you go into a classroom and there's an alien sitting in the classroom. Or maybe one of your teachers has completely flipped. Maybe a teacher who was always really horrible to everybody and maybe picked on people has started to be really, really nice, and that's very, very strange. But again, try and think of the background to the story, the setting, the classrooms that you know. Think of the people that would be in the classroom when this happens, and use all those details in building your kind of thoughts when you're putting this story together. So you've got your ideas, you've got lots of ideas. Don't let them escape. That's a really important tip for people that want to write. Scribble down whatever comes into your head somewhere. Now this is what I do all the time. If I get an idea for a story and it niggles at me and it just doesn't disappear out of my mind right away, then I write it down somewhere because I'll forget it. I'll forget it if I'm got on with doing other things, going to the shops or tidying my house. So I always write things down. I go in and I try and I don't have a kind of posh notebook. I should have, but I just usually find receipts, bus tickets, bits of paper in my handbag, and I scribble notes down on them and I stick them in my jeans pockets. Quite often actually I wash the jeans and I lose the idea, but if I actually manage to take that piece of paper out of my pocket, I'll put it together and kind of gather ideas for one story until I've got enough things to put them onto one huge big mind map. And I usually get a great big piece of paper and I write down all the ideas that belong to one particular story. And that's where I start, that's how I begin to plan. I'm not very organised. I'm going to show you actually my plan for this book here, which is called Bad Wedding. It came out earlier this year. It's quite a short book, so the planning stage for it is actually quite brief. These are some of my ideas, things that I was thinking about, just rough notes on pieces of paper, like that. And here's a lovely, tidy piece of paper with loads of scribbles, writing on it. Some of it's upside down on both sides. And these are all the ideas that ended up in the book. The book's about weddings, so I had to buy a wedding magazine, and these are the pages that I tore out of the wedding magazine that I wanted to use ideas from, and I've kept all these too. I've circled some of the things, made some notes on them, and that's it. That's how I would plan. It would be the same for any book that I'm doing. But the most important thing is don't let ideas slip away. Some of you might be very organised and might actually have a writing notebook. That's great. But just get pieces of paper together and keep them, and you never know when they might come in handy. If you do these tasks and you're pleased with them, why not send them in to the Scottish Book Trust at teen@scottishbooktrust.com, and I'll be delighted to read them. And that's the first task. Good luck, happy writing.